Good evening. Tonight, we're diving into the story of the Republican Party. From Abraham Lincoln to Ronald Reagan to the modern era, the GOP has shaped America's past and continues to define its present. From its progressive origins against slavery to its role in today's culture wars, the GOP's story is one of American political evolution. We'll examine the facts, explore the moments that define the party, and uncover the pivotal decisions that created the Republican Party we know. It's a look at the forces that shape our country. This is the story of the GOP in all its complexity. To understand today's Republican Party, we begin in a time far removed from our current reality. Forget modern conservatism. The party's origins are surprisingly radical. The year was 1854. The nation was divided by slavery. In Ripon, Wisconsin, citizens gathered, united against slavery. They were abolitionists, former Whigs, and Democrats starting a revolution. They formed a new party opposing slavery's expansion. They called themselves Republicans, echoing Jefferson's ideals. The movement spread rapidly. This was a moral crusade for free soil, labor, and speech. Slavery threatened free labor and democracy. The Republican Party was founded to disrupt the status quo. Its origins are a stark contrast to its modern identity. Just 6 years after its furtive beginnings, the Republican Party achieved the unthinkable, capturing the presidency with Abraham Lincoln. His election triggered Southern secession and the Civil War. Lincoln's presidency fused the Republican Party with preserving the Union and abolishing slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation defined the GOP as the Party of Liberation. His legacy bestowed moral authority, making the Party of Lincoln synonymous with unity and freedom. Lincoln remains the historical anchor, a symbol of courage debated in defining the party's identity. To understand the Republican Party, we have to go back to its foundations in the mid-19th century. The most urgent principle was abolition. The early Republican Party was a champion of modernization, advocating for policies that would build a modern, interconnected America. This included supporting the construction of a transcontinental railroad and land grants for colleges. At the same time, the party was deeply committed to the principles of free market capitalism. So you have these three powerful pillars: a moral crusade, a forward-thinking vision, and a firm belief in a free market system. These intertwined ideas formed the ideological bedrock of the early Republican Party. Following the Civil War and Lincoln's assassination, the nation entered Reconstruction. At the forefront were the radical Republicans, believing the South needed remaking. They sought full citizenship for formerly enslaved African Americans, led by figures like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner. They clashed with President Andrew Johnson, who favored leniency. Radicals believed federal intervention was needed to protect black suffrage and equality. They passed landmark legislation including the 14th and 15th Amendments, embedding racial equality into the Constitution. Black men were elected to office. Though short-lived, the radical Republicans championed a vision of racial justice the nation still grapples with. For much of its early history, the Republican Party was widely considered the more liberal or progressive party. This extended to a broader worldview that embraced the power of the federal government as a force for good, to promote economic development, social justice, and national unity. The GOP championed government-led infrastructure projects like the Transcontinental Railroad and established land-grant universities. Prominent Republican figures like Theodore Roosevelt became champions of the progressive era. The story of the Republican Party is a story of profound ideological evolution. It's essential for understanding the dramatic political journey that has shaped the nation we live in. Just 2 years after its founding in a small Wisconsin schoolhouse, the Republican Party faced its first national test in 1856. With the nation divided over slavery, this was their moment to become a cohesive national force. Philadelphia, a city of American independence, was chosen for this historic gathering. Delegates converged on the musical fund hall, believing they were on the front lines of a battle for the soul of America. The convention adopted a radical platform that opposed slavery in the Western territories. This defined the party's early identity, presenting a clear alternative to the status quo. Though their first nominee lost, the convention proved the party was a durable, organized force. It laid the groundwork that would carry Abraham Lincoln to the White House. As America entered the 20th century, the fight for women's suffrage gained momentum. The Republican Party became a crucial ally in this struggle for equality. Republicans saw women's suffrage as a natural extension of liberty and individual rights. Figures like Theodore Roosevelt endorsed the cause, lending it legitimacy. Republican-controlled states in the West had already granted women the right to vote. In 1919, Republican lawmakers provided critical votes for the 19th Amendment's passage. Without their legislative backing, the amendment would have likely stalled. This highlights the party's role in expanding democratic rights in American history. In the post-war boom, America was a nation on the move, with car ownership exploding and suburbs sprawling. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, inspired by Germany's Autobahn and his own cross-country journey, envisioned a modern highway system for commerce, travel, and national defense. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 authorized a 41,000-mile network of high-speed highways, funded by a new federal tax on gasoline. The interstate highway system revolutionized transportation, fueled suburban growth, and connected America like never before. Eisenhower's vision stands as a monument to a stronger, more connected, and more secure United States of America. Tonight, the interstate highway system, a vision that reshaped the American landscape and the way we live. Championed by President Eisenhower, a five-star general who understood logistics. Witnessing Germany's Autobahn convinced him a modern highway network was critical for national defense and economic vitality. Officially, the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, its dual purpose was clear. A Republican-led initiative, it stands as one of the largest public works projects in history. The 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act authorized the 41,000-mile network. The interstate highway system fueled suburban growth and transformed the trucking industry. For Republicans, it remains a monumental achievement, forever changing the United States. The mid-20th century was about to experience a seismic shift, redefining what it meant to be a Republican. The catalyst was Barry Goldwater, whose conservatism would initially lead to defeat, but lay the groundwork for future triumphs. His philosophy, distilled in the conscience of a conservative, championed limited government and individual liberty. Though his 1964 campaign resulted in a landslide victory for Johnson, it awakened a grassroots movement. It mobilized a new generation of conservative activists, inspiring future candidates. Goldwater's ideas captured the party, planting the seeds for the rise of Ronald Reagan. Following the civil rights era, the political map was being redrawn. This is the story of the Southern Strategy, a controversial series of tactics that realigned the Republican Party. Designed to appeal to white Southerners alienated by the Democratic Party's embrace of civil rights, strategists employed coded language emphasizing states' rights and law and order. It flipped the South to a Republican fortress, defining the electoral map today. Critics argue the strategy exploited racial divisions, polarizing politics for decades. Tonight, we look at a pivotal moment that would reshape the Republican Party and American politics. The year is 1964. Senator Barry Goldwater, the face of raw conservatism, challenged the liberal consensus. His campaign prioritized individual liberty and anti-communism. Goldwater's message challenged the GOP establishment, advocating fierce constitutionalism. Though the 1964 election was a landslide defeat, it mobilized a new generation of conservatives. Figures like William F. Buckley Jr. provided the philosophical ammunition for the new right. The seeds planted during that campaign would come to fruition with the election of Ronald Reagan. As the Goldwater movement redefined the Republican Party, another shift was taking place: the Southern Strategy. For nearly a century after the Civil War, the American South had been a Democratic stronghold. But the National Democratic Party's embrace of the civil rights movement created alienation among white Southern voters. Republican strategists saw an opportunity in this turmoil. Richard Nixon's campaigns are often seen as primary examples of the Southern strategy in action. The once solid Democratic South was turning Republican red. It cemented the South's transformation into the GOP's most reliable power base and set the stage for the party's modern identity. Ronald Reagan harvested the seeds of modern conservatism, creating a political force that would dominate the 1980s. Reagan's genius was his ability to weave together disparate factions into a powerful political coalition. He built a three-legged stool of conservatism: fiscal conservatives believing in lower taxes, the religious right concerned with morality, and anti-communist hawks. This fusion created an electoral juggernaut that delivered 2 landslide victories. Tonight we're looking at the forces that shaped modern American politics. In the late 70s, the Republican Party was at a crossroads, searching for a leader. That leader emerged in the form of Ronald Reagan. His 1980 campaign was the beginning of a revolution within the GOP. Reagan possessed a unique ability to connect with a broad spectrum of voters, fundamentally remaking the party's electoral map. Reagan's genius lay in his ability to weave together three powerful ideological threads into a single, cohesive political movement. First, fiscal conservatives energized by Reagan's promises of lower taxes and a smaller federal government. Then came the social conservatives and the burgeoning evangelical movement. Finally, the staunch anti-communists. Reagan's tough talk against the Soviet Union resonated deeply with this group. This three-legged stool became the bedrock of the Reagan coalition. It was a deliberate and masterful act of political engineering. Reagan's message of Morning in America was more than a slogan. By bringing these forces together, Reagan redefined what it meant to be a Republican. Fast forward to 2009. The Tea Party movement, a grassroots insurgency, exploded onto the political scene. Fueled by anger over bank bailouts, the Affordable Care Act, and government spending, it represented raw conservative discontent. It was a decentralized movement that harnessed social media to organize. Members believed in constitutional principles, fiscal responsibility, and limited government. The movement had a profound impact on the GOP, reinvigorating grassroots conservatism. Tea Party-backed candidates challenged establishment Republicans in primary elections. The Tea Party can be seen as a precursor to the forces that propelled Donald Trump to the presidency. In the years following the Tea Party wave, the ideological ground beneath the Republican Party continued to shift. The energy that had once been focused primarily on fiscal matters began to expand, leading the GOP to adopt increasingly hardline stances on immigration and taxation. The conversation inside the party was no longer just about the size of government, but about the very identity of the nation. The pressure from the base, amplified by conservative media, created an environment where moderation was often viewed as betrayal, pushing the party's policy positions further to the right. On immigration, the shift was stark. The era of George W. Bush's compassionate conservatism seemed like a distant memory. Instead, the party grew increasingly focused on border security and enforcement. The debate moved from finding a pathway to citizenship, to building a wall, ending chain migration, and increasing deportations. This hardline stance resonated with the GOP base that felt their security was under threat. It became a litmus test for conservative orthodoxy. A similar dynamic played out on taxation. The Reagan-era principle of tax cuts became an inviolable doctrine. The idea of raising taxes became politically toxic within the party. This culminated in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, dramatically lowering corporate and individual tax rates. For Republicans, it was fulfillment of a core promise. For critics, it was a giveaway that exploded the national debt. This evolution had significant consequences. It solidified the party's base but deepened political polarization, making bipartisan compromise all but impossible. The party was becoming more ideologically uniform. This hardline turn set the stage for the next chapter, creating a political landscape with little room for middle ground. The year is 2009. The country is reeling from the 2008 financial crisis. Barack Obama is in the White House rolling out an economic stimulus package and the Affordable Care Act. Beneath the surface, a different kind of energy is building. A groundswell of frustration and anger. CNBC's Rick Santelli called for a Tea Party to protest government bailouts. The name itself was a callback to the Boston Tea Party. Across the country, ordinary Americans began to organize, united by fiscal conservatism. What followed was an explosion of grassroots activism. They organized rallies and flooded congressional phone lines. Their message was simple: cut spending and reduce the national debt. The impact on the Republican Party was seismic. It propelled a new generation of conservative candidates into office. It fundamentally altered the political landscape. As the Tea Party's influence solidified the Republican Party, it marked a significant ideological shift. One prominent area of transformation was immigration. Figures like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush once supported comprehensive reforms. The new consensus emphasized strict border enforcement, with calls for a border wall moving into the mainstream. The focus shifted toward deportation, away from amnesty. Simultaneously, a similar hardening occurred on taxation. Raising taxes became politically toxic. Pledges to never raise taxes became a prerequisite for many Republican candidates. This led to high-stakes fiscal cliffs and government shutdowns. The party's platform became defined by a hard line on immigration and an unbreakable wall against tax increases. If the Tea Party movement shook the Republican establishment, the election of Donald Trump was the political tsunami that followed. When the real estate mogul announced his candidacy, few took him seriously. He was a celebrity, not a viable contender. But experts failed to see the disconnect between the party's leadership and its voters. Trump's campaign defied every conventional rule. He tapped into the anxieties of working-class voters and promised to make America great again. His victory was a stunning repudiation of the party's old guard. The voters were in control. He was a nationalist populist. He was in essence a hostile takeover of the grand old party. His victory signaled a fundamental realignment in American politics. Following the Reagan years, the Republican Party navigated a complex political landscape. The certainties of the Cold War dissolved, leaving a vacuum within the party. The question became defining what it meant to be Republican in a post-Cold War world. George H.W. Bush's presidency exemplified this struggle. His decision to raise taxes created a rift with fiscal conservatives, fueling distrust of Washington. Cultural battles intensified, shaping the party's identity. Figures like Pat Buchanan championed a more nationalist and socially conservative vision. With the end of the Cold War, domestic concerns took center stage. This led to the Contract with America in 1994, promising fiscal discipline and a smaller government. It tapped into public discontent and reshaped Congress. The 2016 election began with a crowded field of established Republicans. Then, Donald Trump descended the golden escalator and dismantled every notion of a Republican candidate. His campaign was a disruptive force the party establishment failed to stop. Trump spoke directly to voters ignored by both parties. He promised a border wall and eschewed fiscal conservatism for nationalism. His primary victory shocked the establishment. Trump mastered social media, controlling the news cycle. His victory over Hillary Clinton was a significant political upset. Trump's election broke the Republican Party, forcing a painful realignment. With Donald Trump's ascension to the presidency, the themes of populism and nationalism were elevated to become the central tenets of his administration and the Republican Party's new identity. This was not the internationalist free trade conservatism of Ronald Reagan or the Bushes. Instead, it was an America First doctrine that prioritized national interests above all else. The party's platform began to transform, reflecting deep skepticism of global institutions, international alliances, and multilateral agreements. This nationalist shift was most evident in economic policy. The Trump administration pursued protectionist measures, imposing tariffs on goods from China and other countries, including traditional allies. This challenged the free market orthodoxy that had been a cornerstone of Republican ideology. The goal was to protect American industries and bring back manufacturing jobs. This populist message resonated with his base, even as it created friction with free trade Republicans worried about trade war consequences. On immigration, campaign rhetoric became hardline policy. The promise to build the wall remained central, representing stricter border enforcement and reduced legal and illegal immigration. The travel ban targeting Muslim-majority countries and zero-tolerance family separation policy became flashpoints of national debate. These actions moved away from compassionate conservatism toward a more restrictive, nationalist approach. This ideology reshaped the party's relationship with the world. Trump expressed skepticism about NATO, demanding increased defense spending from allies. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement and the Iran nuclear deal. This America First foreign policy was framed as putting American interests first, cementing populism and nationalism as the new forces driving the Republican Party. Donald Trump's rise brought populism and nationalism to the forefront, marking a departure from traditional GOP ideals. His message resonated with those feeling left behind, bypassing traditional media to connect directly with supporters. The message was simple: the system is rigged and I am your voice. This resonated in the Rust Belt and rural America, accompanied by a nationalism that prioritized national interests. Policies like the border wall and a confrontational approach to trade signaled a retreat from global commitments. This shift has profound implications, redrawing the electoral map and sparking ongoing debate about America's identity and future. The Trump presidency has left the Republican Party at a critical crossroads, a house deeply divided. Traditional conservatives clash with MAGA loyalists, a battle for the party's soul. Primaries reveal this clash, with establishment candidates challenged by Trump-endorsed newcomers. This divide creates a dilemma for Republican leadership and the future of the two-party system. One of the most enduring legacies of recent Republican leadership is the marbled chambers of the United States Supreme Court. Republican presidents have successfully appointed the majority of justices. This has yielded a solid conservative supermajority, shifting the legal landscape. Landmark rulings like the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade. This underscores the immense power wielded by the justices and the long-term impact of presidential appointments. The effort resulted in 3 justices during the Trump administration, cementing a 6-3 conservative lean. The Republican Party has achieved one of its most cherished goals, fundamentally reshaping the American judiciary. Tonight, we're looking at a party at a crossroads, a fundamental schism that really defines its modern identity. It's a house deeply divided against itself, a landscape fractured by competing ideologies and loyalties. On one side you have the traditional conservatives, the establishment figures who for decades defined the party's platform. On the other side stands a formidable force, the MAGA loyalists, born in the rallies that propelled Donald Trump to the presidency. Their allegiance is not necessarily to the Republican Party, but to the populist movement he represents. This internal conflict shapes every aspect of the party's function. In races across the country, we see this battle play out in real time. The result is a constant state of tension, a tug-of-war for control of the party's direction, its message, and ultimately, its very soul. The consequences of this division are profound, extending beyond the party itself. They are the central challenge facing the GOP today, a division that shows no signs of healing. One of the most enduring legacies of any political party is the power to shape the nation's highest court. Today, a majority of justices were appointed by Republican presidents. This is a deliberate strategy to install judges who adhere to specific legal philosophies. The impact of this influence is monumental, touching nearly every aspect of American life. The overturning of Roe v. Wade is a prominent example, a seismic shift from strategic judicial appointments. Looking ahead, the Supreme Court remains a central political battleground shaping American society for decades. In the modern political landscape, the lines between media and political activism have become increasingly blurred. For the Republican Party, Fox News stands out as its most powerful media ally. Since its launch in 1996, the network has become a central pillar of the Republican ecosystem. It is widely seen as the party's de facto media megaphone, a platform that amplifies and defends its agenda to a loyal audience. Republican politicians frequently appear on the network, often bypassing traditional media outlets. Critics argue that the network functions as state-affiliated media, contributing to partisan polarization. Regardless of one's perspective, Fox News is a dominant force in conservative media and a crucial partner to the modern Republican Party. Tonight, we're keeping them honest, turning our attention to legislation central to the Republican Party's agenda at the state level, focusing on what children can read in schools and who can vote, and how. The arguments are framed around parental rights and election integrity, but critics see a deliberate effort to control narratives and access to the ballot box, raising fundamental questions about the direction of American democracy itself. These legislative pushes reveal a strategic shift within the GOP, focusing on state-level action to drive a national agenda. Yet, it also deepens the country's political polarization, with the long-term consequences for education and democratic participation still unfolding. Political campaign funding has radically transformed, with the Republican Party at the forefront. Small dollar or micro-donations now power the party, democratizing political financing. This relies on urgent email and text campaigns, tapping into supporters' passions. PACs remain powerful, providing massive cash infusions for advertising. This creates a dual-track system, populist micro-donations and big-money donors. This combination has created a formidable fundraising apparatus for the Republican Party. It raises questions about influence and who the party is truly accountable to. For years, the Republican Party was skeptical of the scientific consensus on climate change. The issue was framed as a choice between environmental protection and economic prosperity. Policies aimed at reducing emissions were attacked as job-killing overreach. But lately we've seen subtle shifts in that position. A growing faction of Republicans is beginning to acknowledge the reality of a changing climate, focusing on innovation and adaptation. This proposes market-based solutions like carbon capture, nuclear energy, and conservation. Younger conservatives are showing greater concern for environmental issues, and the economic impacts of climate change are becoming impossible to ignore. This creates tension within the GOP, between old priorities and a changing reality. The party's direction on climate change is uncertain, but will have profound implications. Tonight, we're looking at a fundamental question facing the Republican Party today. What does it truly stand for? The party that once defined itself with fiscal conservatism, a strong national defense, and social traditionalism, now finds itself at a crossroads. This isn't just an academic debate, it's a battle for the very soul of the GOP. This internal conflict is perhaps the most significant story in American politics today. It's a fundamental schism over what it means to be a Republican in the 21st century. Ultimately, this struggle for identity will define the Republican Party for a generation to come. The Republican Party of tomorrow may look very different from the one we know today. We'll be watching. The Republican Party's elephant symbol is instantly recognizable. Its origins lie in 19th century political cartoons by Thomas Nast. In 1874, Nast depicted an elephant labeled the Republican vote. He continued using the elephant, portraying it as powerful. The elephant came to represent strength and dignity. A satirical critique evolved into the party's official emblem. It's a testament to the power of political imagery. It started as a joke but became an icon of strength. We've journeyed through a century of political history, from anti-slavery roots to the modern party. The Republican Party is the story of America itself. Understanding this history is crucial for understanding our nation's political discourse and its future. Now we want to hear from you. What surprised you the most? Let us know what you think, what you learned, and what questions you still have. Please like and share this video and subscribe to Newsstream. Thanks for watching.